campaigns kick off, because it is then that we'll know whether Rigathi Gachagua is going to go home or is going to go to court, because that's the next phase, or he will be retained. But it's a very dicey situation. To help me basically talk about it, and by the way, did you know that KRA is planning to start monitoring tills and pay bills? No wonder if you go to Isli, people are not using that. So we're going to also look at some of those shortly. But to help us get a better understanding of this, I have George Ngaira with me in the studio. Karibu sana, George.
Thank you very much for having me, Fred.
We called it. It happened. Were you shocked by what happened or in Parliament?
Not very much, if you have taken time to listen to see the trajectory that you've been taking over time.
Yes.
And I think Kenyans, those who are keen on the issues of public, on public issues, particularly the politics of our country, at some point it was going to happen if we were not going to manage the personalities and the egos at play. Fred, I think finally I can now be considered a prophet that this day, because I predicted this day will come, that there is no way that this president and this deputy president, if they are not, that's why even couples sometimes advise to go through therapy, is because there's a third party who then can see from the outside and then try to encourage each of the persons to consider their strengths and their weaknesses and how they can be able to merge it so that they can continue being a family. And I think this president and this deputy president needed that. But maybe they never had an opportunity to get an intermediary to be able to manage their personal interest and maybe political interest.
Now, I've spoken to a number of people within Gachagua's camp.
Yes.
And some of them are telling me, they are being caned by different people, including MPs from Central, yes, claiming that the move to have Rigathi Gachagua hold a presser on the eve was a bad call. Do you think it was a bad call?
Professionally, it was a bad call because in any organization, for effective communication, then the leader of the organization becomes the final voice to what has happened.
The leader of this organization being the president?
In this country. That's what I'm saying. Professionally, it was a bad call because that's what happened in organized institutions, because then even if there are issues that are being raised at play, that is addressed in the boardroom so that then you're able to manage the communication of that entity.
Yes.
And for our country, considering, Fred, what happened on that June 25th was historic. In most countries, I've said many times, some of them do not survive days like those ones. Because once you get into parliament and you ban parliament, most times governments collapse.
Yes. And
so it was a very dicey situation that you wouldn't want to have miscommunication or at least a blame game and that kind of a thing. In conflict resolution, Fred, the first thing you do is call ceasefire. When people are fighting, you don't come and say, I'm with Fred or I'm with Ngaira.
Yes.
First of all, say, let the fighting stop. So that would have been the immediate cause for the government and including the deputy president on that day. But for him to immediately respond to that, it looked like it's something that he had already at heart and he was only looking forward to. Sometimes it happens, Fred, that somebody might want to tell you something, but then he looks for that opportune time to be able to do that.
I think it was, politically, it was a brilliant, bold move.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. When you look at it professionally, it was a bad thing.
Yes.
But for him, it seems like it was a moment where now he can bring in probably his personal issues that he had with the government and many other officials, because at that point, the government was checkmated by the public, not just the politician. And this is a big audience. Fred, one day when we get to any elections, as I've said many times, is when we'll truly begin to get the opinions of the people. Did you watch the public participation process across the country? Some people didn't even care about the impeachment. They had their own personal issues, and they came to those forums to just say Ruto must go. Because he's the president. Nobody else can go. Ngaira can't go. I don't have a public service office. So it was only going to be the leader of the country.
Yes.
So I think from where I sit, and you're very right, that professionally that wasn't the right thing to do, but clearly the deputy president can see that, and he's been complaining for a while, remember. It's not a topic that began last week. So probably that was just an opportune time for him to be able to raise the issues that he had with government, which was politically was very tactical. Because the regions that he comes from, as he had mentioned, has now quickly been converted to his. And there's another one. He's speaking the language of the young people of what they were saying. And he has 3 years to work on it.
When I looked at what he was doing and his speech, he was not targeting members of parliament.
Absolutely.
He was seeking to win the heart of the people.
Yeah.
And do you think he achieved that?
And you know, the press that he did the night before was a masterstroke.
Yes.
Because he'd already now gone to the public court of the public opinion. And you saw the response if you took time to see. You know, the good thing with now technology is that you can look at history and read what people's opinions were. What ordinarily Moi would need, Nyayo back then would need to do calls, you know, to the district office. And now you can literally be able to see what our people are saying. And that was a masterstroke, because there are people who didn't know that some of the properties, in real sense, for those who know the family of Gachagua, would tell you they would know those properties have been there for a long time. The president might have, or the politicians that are working with the president might have an issue with the Gachagua, but maybe the tact didn't go very well.
Yes.
Because clearly most of the allegations that were given were saying is tribal. This government has had serious challenges with tribalism. So it's very hard to sell it. Maybe to a few of the president's hard supporters.
Yes.
But for the other ones, in the other regions,
they can clearly see.
Yeah, they can clearly see. You cannot, this president cannot say that we are impeaching you because you're tribal. Yet you're the one that is being accused of tribalism every day.
Yes.
He can't come and say, you know, you've amassed all these properties overnight. Yet there's some serious questions that this president, remember, is on record in courts. This president, William Samoei Ruto, as an individual, has a lot of pending cases in courts. So when you say that you see this guy has criminal tendencies, there is one that the whole world knows. True or false?
Yes, very true.
The president has been to ICC, the highest court on earth. We're not saying he's guilty, but he's already familiar with court. So if he's the one to again move the motion and say, we are impeaching you because you have criminal tendencies, maybe those are not the right people to say it. So the deputy president was very sharp. And politically, he knew it, and he has played effectively to the public gallery.
And the beauty is, he took so much time. It was almost 2 hours and what?
Yeah.
The press conference before.
Yeah, almost
2 and a half, maybe 2.5 hours.
Yes.
Just, you know,
explain himself.
Explaining his case and winning the hearts of the people.
Across almost all networks.
Yes, actually almost all major, all networks, all major networks, including ours, were live.
Yeah.
And so we were showing, we gave him a platform. He got a platform where he explained his case. He literally.
And also the emotional appeal.
Yes.
Fred, I don't know if you checked, there's a moment when he, the next day in Parliament, and I think this is a very tactical approach for this deputy president as a politician. You know, those who had come to lynch him in Parliament, one of them was the deputy speaker of the National Assembly, the lady from Masingishu,
Gladys Boss-Sholay.
And, you know, while responding to her, the deputy president said something that was very emotional. He gave a story of how when they were being persecuted by the other government, and he said, Boss Sholay was with me all throughout. He saw what use of state machinery for political persecution was that, and he thanked her for the wonderful job he did. And despite the fact that today she's calling for his jail, his imprisonment, he still said, thank you for what you did for me. It was a very emotional moment.
Yeah.
And if looking at how he campaigns this president, even when you look at the deputy president, and you look at how he did it even in the 2022 elections, how emotional his voice sometimes it turns when he goes into Rocky and stuff like that. You wouldn't want to have him as an opponent. And
you know, even during the press conference, there are moments, and mostly so when he's talking about his brother, he was almost at the point of breaking.
Very true.
You could tell emotionally his voice and his face. He was almost very emotional.
Fred, you know, in 2013, when we were running, President Uhuru Kenyatta was running with William Ruto, the opposition, the Prime Minister then, Raila Odinga, made a very terrible mistake when he went on air and said, in one of those political random statements, he said, these are criminals that belong to jail. You know, he made a statement like that.
Yes.
And you know, President Uhuru Kenyatta the next weekend was in Nyeri, somewhere in the Mount Kenya. And he said, and he was appealing to the people and saying, if you don't vote for me, these guys are going to jail us, and they've told us in broad daylight.
Yes.
That thing worked because that anti-ICC hate gave the president maximum turnout that he needed in the mountain. What this president has just done is handed over you know, that
Central Kenya has literally been handed over on a silver platter to Rigathi Gachagua.
Absolutely, out of just the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Not that even that you like him.
Yeah.
But you see, what counts is the numbers. If those people turn up and support him, Fred, today, next week, as you mentioned, on Wednesday, if things go the way we are suspecting, that they likely do intend to impeach him, and of course this deputy president wouldn't want to be impeached, and he resigns and becomes a citizen, he becomes the first competitor of this president in the next election, because there's the numbers and the resources to actually move that. As to whether he wins or not is a different debate.
Does he have a prayer in the Senate? Because I believe that the Senate is going to vote exactly the same way the National Assembly voted, because they've been whipped.
Fred, whoever executed this impeachment process looked at it wholesomely. That's why you don't wake up and plan to impeach a president and you just think about assembly and sit down. You look at it wholesomely, the political consequences of that, and the stability of the country. I think from where they sit, they had concluded that this deputy president has no base, which was fairly true, that he wouldn't specifically say this was his base, never mind the mountain voted for the president big time. But you see, that's where now real politicians come in.
Yes.
And they're able to now touch the raw nerves of the people. And unfortunately for them, this deputy president has successfully done that. But also sometimes I can have very wonderful ideas, Fred, but I might not be able to have capacity to compete with you so that I can get to the people to be able to sell the very nice ideas that I have. Unfortunately for this government, again, this deputy president has the capacity to actually move around this country. Fred, I've always said this. In the interest of wanting to never to support the issue of tribal politics. I've always said this, that the Kenya Constitution allows every Kenyan, for as long as he qualifies to run for any seat, to run, regardless of whether or not there was a new president yesterday. As a citizen of the Republic of Kenya, I am free provided I am able to run. So nothing stops Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua from running for the presidential seat.
Unless he's impeached.
Unless he's impeached, which is not going to happen.
Yes, it's going to happen.
No, the process, you see,
after Senate, he goes to court, to the Court of Appeal. And then after the Court of Appeal, he goes to the Supreme Court.
You see, Fred, that would be a huge gamble for him. Because what the president wants to go through with is the process of impeachment. The courts is a different ballgame, my brother. Those ones can be able to be achieved. The target of whoever we're planning this impeachment can be able to achieve it. They are not strange, as we know, the judiciary. His real chance is that he must now become a citizen by Monday night, if he feels that for sure they're impeaching him, or that he has not been able to get the right injunctions from court. You see, what happened to Governor Kawira is that she went to court in the middle of that impeachment process, and there was an injunction by court to stop the process. But the MCAs actually proceeded and impeached him.
Yes.
So when the process went through the Senate, they only needed to get an injunction that they didn't adhere to a court decision, and that was suspended. Kawira Mwangaza is back in court. The good thing with courts is that there is what you call it's a court of records, so that even if today you can escape prosecution, we can still get to 60 years from now, because it's on record that you ought to have done ABCD. That's what Matiang'i was dealing with the issue of a contempt of court. Remember, there's a bunch of court decisions they didn't follow. So it was very easy to get him that. He was forced now, after he left office, to go back to court and seek an appeal on the charge that he had already gotten it, because those court decisions don't change. You understand?
They remain.
So they remain because criminal liabilities are a lifetime. We can get you at 90 years and still take you to court. You understand? So for him, he only has an opportunity in court before the Senate's final vote. But otherwise, if he sits through to the Senate final vote, and the Senate impeaches him and is gazetted by midnight, you know the way they've planned it. It's going to end at night.
Pretty fast.
Sonko can tell you what happened. His impeachment ended at midnight, and by 1 or 12:01,
there was a gazette
notice. So by the time he went to court in the morning, he was already impeached. It was out of time.
Yes.
You understand? So this president has just a window between, deputy president, has a window between now and Tuesday to be able to do that. If not, then he must prepare. And I truly believe, because I have from some quarters, I was listening to some friends of mine, and they're telling me, Malala and the other guys are around him. We were just sort of chatting, and they're telling me for sure they have a plan for 2027 And this deputy president himself is on record, if you check, he has said from December there will be some very serious decisions. He had said that earlier on.
Yes, he had said
from
that.
December, in one of the churches, he said from December there will be very serious decisions. I think he was he was trying to hint it to the MPs who are not supporting it, that they have to make a decision by December because they have other agendas. For sure, he will not allow himself to be impeached so that he is kicked out of office.
So we are looking at, I was just, looking at some of the stories that are coming out that on the day that he was to be impeached,
Yes.
The president called him.
Absolutely.
And they had some conversation. It didn't last long. And that conversation just made him know that he is on his own. Very
true. It's possible that the president was calling him to sort of, and that's why I said, because we don't have background information of what even led to the fallout. We can only do guesswork and think maybe it was political, maybe it was financial, maybe it was business. But you see, and sometimes maybe they were using this as a way to be able to twist him, and you're supposed to cede on some things. And so that call, by the time they're giving him, the president maybe was just doing his last bit of saying, will you or will you not?
I'm not the one who is pushing this.
Absolutely.
Because if you can remember, prior to this, members of parliament, because I remember the president had been out, he had gone to the States,
yes,
and members of parliament were telling the president, maybe just preempting this conversation, that no matter what you do, this is ours. You stay out, we don't want executive. But there's no way this can pass without it being the president.
Fred, you just previously here mentioned of whether or not it was right for the deputy president to give a presser after the president on the day when we had the mass demonstration.
Yes.
If you look at it from a political angle, you'd understand that by then it meant that there were differences in government.
Okay, let me take a short break. I sort out your microphone. Okay, let's take that short break. When we come back, we pick up on that. Oh, welcome back. I believe we've sorted that out. Just before we went for that short break,
yes,
Ngere, you're talking about, the deputy president, yes, and the calls that were made and what happens now.
Yeah, exactly. I was alluding to that. The president's call to the deputy president was without a doubt not surprising, because clearly when you look at the events that had preceded this particular process of impeachment, is that we had already seen the fallouts that were there before, and that's why I was mentioning the deputy president's reaction to the Gen Z and the presser that came after the president's speech, which was unprofessional in many ways. We've already agreed, is that you could tell now there are differences within government. It was very clear. And the deputy president didn't mince his words. He was very specific, even went into the departments and said, this department has failed, this particular person has failed, these are the people who failed this government in terms of giving our intelligence reports. He was very clear. So up until then, I truly believe the deputy president had already concluded that he's a marked person in this government.
Yes.
And not to forget what Oscar Sudi said 2 weeks ago, that he said maximum 2 weeks, this guy will be gone. And for sure, he's almost there in 2 weeks. He's been impeached, you understand? So he had already seen this coming. I think what they were working on, there's been rumors that the deputy president already secured some political party, which I'm very familiar with. And so he clearly has looked ahead of what's coming. And I doubt the person of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is somebody that can sit and watch people.
He cannot go down.
It is impossible.
Quietly.
It is impossible. Anybody who thinks that can happen. If he could take on Uhuru Kenyatta, who was his boss for 20 years, as Deputy Prime Minister and eventually as President, they worked together for almost 20 years. And he could go hard on him the way he did. What about Ruto, who is an outsider?
One of the things that I noticed is There are bloggers
Yes.
who are known to be very close to the former president.
Yes.
I will just say there's a lady,
Yes.
very strong blogger,
Yeah.
known to be, and she has a group of people
Yeah.
who basically were tweeting for the former president Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yeah.
At the beginning, she had started making tweets and basically her team blogging in favor of Gachagua.
Yes.
But towards, after a certain point, she turned. She and her team now became very opposed to the deputy president,
Yes.
Rigathi Gachagua.
Yes.
They say you hit a dog, and when it screams out, you will know the owner.
Yes.
Now, this lady is the fact that she's been now blogging negative blogs against the deputy president, an indication that the current deputy president and the former president are not reading from the same page.
No, I think, and I believe I have an idea of who you're talking about. Fred, politics is very dynamic, and people change, and those people who succeed to survive for many years. That's why I always say, do not ever underrate somebody like former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka. Fred, to be re-elected 5 times, it cannot be by fluke. It is something that you usually do that appeals to your people, that they can consistently elect you through different regimes, President Moi, President Kibaki, and be able to be relevant up until today. That requires somebody who's tactical in his mind and is be able to read the mood of the people every time. Kalonzo was the last person to actually move out of KANU into LDP to form the NAC merger, because nobody really believed he was he wasn't even one of the options.
Yes.
Because he had never been on the streets. Kalonzo Musyoka has never been a street fighter for the struggle of the things that Kina Orengo did. He just came in the last minute because he was able to read the mood of the country. Never mind that he was one of those who were being considered as the blue-eyed boys of Moi. Him and Msali and Uhuru. Those were President Moi's, sons. You understand? So that would be the last person you'd expect to say he's abandoning Moi. And so, but you see, he's been able to read that mood and continue to transition until he became the Vice President of the Republic of Kenya. That will go into history to never be taken away.
And he's still enjoying the pension.
He's still enjoying the paycheck up until today.
Yes.
He has had security guards at his home since 1986. Almost 40 years now. You understand? It's a long time. So Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua being somebody that understands that. So when you have the likes of, my instincts tell me you're talking about Pauline Njoroge. And so for them, it's just a question of trying to weigh the reactions of the people, because them and those that are aligned to her, remember, were what we consider the Azimio bloggers at that particular time. And today, Raila Odinga, who was a candidate for Azimio, is being backed by government. So they have to balance their interests, because if Raila Odinga succeeds to go to AU, those are going to be some of the beneficiaries of that particular move. But if you're smart and keen and you've listened to what Kenyans are saying in the last 1 week, Fred, and you are from the mountain, it is not very hard to read the mood of the people. And that would mean then any tactical politician is going to be the one who's going to align with them, to align himself to what is happening. President William Ruto walked around this country for 2 years alone with Ndindi Nyoro and Kimani Ichung'wah. Many, more than 3/4 of those who joined him later, only came after they realized the Hustler Nation campaign has now matured.
Yes.
That consistency is what makes leaders. You create a movement and you stay on course over time to be able to build an alliance that is credible. And I truly believe that this deputy president, if he sits and works on this particular region and 1 or 2 other regions, I mentioned here that somebody was talking about something called Bantu Alliance. It might be an ethnic consolidation, but the idea is to bring the western region and the eastern region and the mountain and the coast. Fred, those are 30 counties with almost 15 million votes.
But knowing the intricacies of the Kenyan politics, it's an almost impossible task to achieve, because the communities have their interests.
Very true.
So Rigathi has no problem getting Central. He already has it.
Yeah.
He has no problem getting Kalonzo Musyoka.
They've already aligned.
Yeah, they've already aligned. Western Kenya is where the rubber meets the road.
And the cost.
Where Western Kenya and the coast. And these are very critical if he's to, generate a critical mass.
Fred, the mountain has 4 million votes.
Yes.
Kalonzo Musyoka has about 2.5 million votes. That's 6.5 million votes just by taking off. You can win an election with those two before you go anywhere else. You might just work on a threshold, which is to get 20% or 25% from whatever region that you go. That union alone can deliver a winning vote. Those two, who already have agreed to work together. It's not a rumor. They were together, Kalonzo Musyoka, lately.
Yes.
They've been together. So that is no longer even a discussion.
Yes, they're already together.
They're already, that's why you've seen some of his allies, the likes of IT2 and stuff, they've now been moving around with Kalonzo, especially in the mountain. Every time he goes to the mountain, he's now lately with them. So that is a done deal. That section, the eastern and the central province, those two regions, and the diaspora vote, we're talking of minimum 6 million. Anybody with 6 million can win an election, Fred, because this president, they won the elections with just about 7 million, 7.1 million. So 6.5 million, for sure, it can win an election.
Yes.
So the others will just be a top-up. It's just that, yes, I agree because of the dynamics of the Kenyan politics, is that then how does... in the event, for example, assuming that the president then resigns and now he's also
the deputy president.
The deputy president, resigns and now is, and actually makes it clear that he's now an opponent in the coming elections, is that then the history that we've already had presidents, a lot of presidents from that particular region. So he might not want to be a candidate so that he just doesn't coerce the other regions. This happened in Malawi. That's how President Chakwera won the election. Because the vice president, unfortunately, the one who passed on, was the vice president of President Mutharika.
Yes.
In his first term. And then they had a fallout like the one this president has had.
Yes.
And Malawi, just like in Kenya, has provinces and communities. And the guy comes from a community that is the largest. So when he just shifted from being a vice president and went to become a vice president of Chakwera, they delivered a knockout for that president. They couldn't win that election because the margins were big. That is what you're looking at, because Rigathi Gachagua then comes in with almost 5 million votes. It doesn't matter where it goes, but whoever gets that bunch, even if it's 60-70% of that, because it can never be 100% over the years. That's why we had the likes of Kamodo those days of Moi. We had the likes of in Western Kenya, we had the likes of Wetangula who were in Kano those days, and Davadi. They were never in opposition. So there will always be a percentage that will stick with the other side.
Yes.
So there are people who will stick with this president. That's why you have the Kimani Ichung'was and stuff. They will, and they might deliver some votes. But in the event that he becomes an opponent of this president, whether as a candidate or as a kingmaker, and is able to deliver 60 or 70% of that vote to whoever, that person has a massive head start in this campaign.
True.
Which is almost 6.5 million. So he just needs now then to work on the few areas, on the other areas, because the mountain has about 10 counties. I think the eastern region can give him around 4 or 6. Alonso, that is. Then he's at 16. So just to do another 8. Which is why I'm saying he can get that in the western or the coast region, because those are opposition areas whose journey with the current leader of opposition is almost ending, including myself.
True.
Raila Odinga will be 80 years.
Yes.
That journey is ending. If you listen to the people now, they're looking. That's why you have the Tembea and the Tower movement.
Yes.
What he's saying is that we've had this journey for a long time. Now it's time we begin now to have a new dispensation, and those people are open-minded to such ideas.
Now let me ask you.
Yes.
Peradventure, this petition, it fails. And
in court?
Whichever. It fails either in the Senate or in court.
Yes.
And Ruto is forced to remain with Gachagua as his deputy president for the next 3 years.
That will be a very familiar situation, because that's where we were in the last regime. But the opponent is a brutal one. It's a very familiar position, because clearly this president was not in tandem with his former boss, and that's why they had a fallout. And clearly his former boss openly campaigned for his opponent.
Yes.
So we can conclude they disagreed. So that's a familiar place that we've been as Kenyans. But you see, that president handled his deputy in a different way. He allowed him to thrive. He allowed his people to see. Somebody like Charles Keter is the president's personal confidant.
Yes.
But he sat in cabinet until the last day when he decided to go and run for governor.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of opponents you take out immediately, you realize you have fallen out. But he allowed them. This is different. This is different because this president has already shown that
he's already shown the card he was
clear
hiding.
That
Yes.
it's very clear that he wants him out, and now Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is a wounded animal, quote in quote, and for sure the reaction will be much more emotive than what we had even in the other.
Because I'm imagining if he's allowed, if these two again, or the country is forced to have these two as president and deputy president for the next 3 years.
Fred, how do you
I don't see any development happening in this country.
That's what I've told you. Anybody, I did say just off before coming, I said next Wednesday could be a turning point. How do you go back to sit to a cabinet where the Secretary of Cabinet, Mercy Wanjohi, is the lead witness to take you out? How do you do that? Because you know her and Sakaja are some of those witnesses that are going to be in the Senate to actually give evidence against his deputy president. That is a very serious takedown. So I doubt whether he would even be able to show up for those cabinet posts. Being that is the kind of person that appears to take things personally if you listen to him and the way he talks, and how he campaigned against someone that was a personal, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua might have just become an ally of William Ruto maybe in the last 2-3 years. Yeah. But for Uhuru Kenyatta, they go way back for almost 20 years. Those are 2 decades. And look at how he went against him on everything, his family, his properties, and the way
it's going to be brutal.
Now you can imagine for William Ruto, it's going to be something else. And for me, I keep saying, and if this president, on a different show, and I alluded to you with some other people that I told you yesterday, we're just trying to see, because they must have thought through this process that are initiating.
From beginning to the end.
That we're impeaching this guy. But what are the consequences? Every action has a reaction. And they must have weighed the options and things like that. And we were asking ourselves, what could be the thing that made them conclude this is the right move? Because from where it stands, Fred, even the public participation, which turned out to be a referendum across the country for this government, it was easy mobilization for the deputy president. There's some villagers in Samburu who didn't even know what is happening. But the public participation reminded them there's somebody that is being impeached. So Rigathi Gachagua did not need to travel. He does not need to campaign now. He just needs to take a position. And I doubt whether this president made the right political move, because the consequences are just too big.
And now he's been painted as a betrayer.
Absolutely.
I don't know how he'll be able to shake this off, because initially they had painted, and I don't know how Rigathi Gachagua will be able again to shake off the tag of a tribalist and for the president the tag of a betrayer.
Fred, they say for you to be a leader you must believe in something. But for you to have followers, they must believe in what you're saying.
Yes.
That's why even Al-Shabaab, I keep saying, is a criminal organization that does extremely ungodly things. But it has leaders.
Yes.
But it has leaders. And those people, Fred, we were here, we were watching on live TV. And fortunately for me, I was actually heading to Westlands on that day. And I was meeting a friend of mine called Shiv. He's an Asian guy. We were supposed to meet at that Java. I only happened to be having a morning class at Nazarene. And the person who delayed me from getting to Westgate was a friend of mine called Vincent, because he had said he'll drop me to Westlands. So I waited for his class, which then I delayed by an hour. So by the time we get to Sarit, there was traffic already going in. And because he was heading to another meeting, and I'd called my friend who was going to delay, I told him, no problem, you can turn, let me just stroll. And at that particular time is when Westgate was being attacked, because that's where we were going. It was a narrow escape. And so if an organization like that does such heinous crime can have leaders, I think even within the political realm here, it's possible for any leader to create followers. So there are people who might have not agreed with this deputy president. But if he creates a narrative that now people can agree on, this president was not as popular as he was in 2022 in Mount Kenya before. In fact, many people doubted whether the mountain would vote for him. But he was able to package a narrative and sell it to the people. And the people said they agreed. The deputy president has 3 years to be able to do that, friends. And for him, it is confirmed. The others was suspected. We suspect the president has done this to the deputy president. But this one, if they take him out on Wednesday, then he has truly been betrayed. It's easy to sell. It's very easy to sell that. And that's why I told somebody, it doesn't matter. You know, a lot of people are dismissing and saying, oh, Gachagua cannot beat William Ruto. Gachagua does not need to run to beat William Ruto. He just needs to consolidate that vote and take it to wherever. He can take it to the forest.
Yes.
But for as long as he's taking it away from the president, a vote that formed almost 48%, where in this region, Fred, are there 4 million votes where he can replace? You tell me, where? In which region? Not in coast where this president can say, it's unfortunate we did a miscalculation, 2 million or maybe 3 million, because I'm telling you there are people who still stand with the president in that region, so we can give him a percentage. But if Rigathi is able even to take 20% and hand it over to any other person, this president has to recover those votes.
And chances are he might retain, he might, in the 2026, 27 rather, he might become the deputy president to Kalonzo Musyoka.
That will be a real game changer, because the debate has been, and that's why I was alluding to the new party, because some gentlemen that I know who happens to be in those circles, they're telling me we are going to the ballot. But Rigathi will not be on the ticket as the main candidate because of the optics of it. We've had already 3 Kikuyu presidents. It becomes a hard sell in other regions. For an easy sell, they need a softer face that is new and fresh. That's where the debate of Kalonzo and Natembeya has been coming in. Because those two come from the regions that, for sure, Fred, if you combine the 3.5 million votes that are from Western region, a lot of times people just look at the Western, the native Western vote, for example, Fred. So it's about 2.2, maybe 2.5 million. Those who are residents in Western. But they forget there's the diaspora vote. I am a diaspora Western voter because I vote in Nairobi. Nairobi has another 600,000 voters who are from Western. And you know, we have other poaches bits of it. So it's almost 4 million votes. If you can try and consolidate 70-80% of that vote from Western and mark it with Central and Eastern, Fred, you only have to perform a miracle to outnumber that. Because there is nowhere else, not even in Nyanza. If Raila Odinga was on the ballot and still the turnout is not more than 80%, then what about if there is no candidate on the ballot?
They won't turn out.
They won't turn out because, and you can imagine for Raila Odinga, who has tried many times, the passion is supposed to be high. Because we've tried this thing 2, 3, 4 times. You expect almost 90% turnout, but they still don't turn out to vote. So will you tell me now that Raila is not on the ballot, that Nyanza will have 100%? It's impossible. That will not, Nani. I think the president might have gambled, and that's why it will be very interesting to see what he does, even with in the event that the deputy president exits the deputy presidency position next week, most likely, and then the president has 60 days to be able to go through the process of getting a new deputy president, which is you nominate somebody, goes into parliament, and then is vetted, and then is sworn in. That could take a maximum of 60 days. It will be interesting to see who then he replaces Rigathi Gachagua, because I'm trying to imagine the easy thing would be that you'd get somebody from Central, Kindiki or Waiguru, as they're saying, or somebody else.
I think Waiguru will be a hard sell. Kindiki is a softer person, easy to receive kind of person.
But then would he be accepted by the masses? If the masses have considered this as betrayal, then you have a Komodo situation where you are in the system but you're not very popular with the people.
I think he might go with Kindiki as he tries to break Mount Kenya. See, Mount Kenya East, Mount Kenya West. Might go with Kindiki so that, you know, the Meru, Tharaka, that area might be swayed.
And where does this leave? Fred, the Meru, the East and the Mount Kenya East has less than 1 million votes combined. That is Meru, Embu and Tharaka Nithi. And you know, that can't give him the political guarantees that he needs. So it's very little. And you remember Meru is actually divided. That Kindiki comes from the Tharaka region. So with Munyas and my friend Lenny Kivuti, I haven't seen him for a long time, but I like him from Embu. You know, he's always all of those rabble-rousers, an underdog, because he comes from a minority community, but he's always willing to fight. I think that's why he succeeded in business, because you need that fighting personality. He's a billionaire. He's a billionaire. So I doubt whether Kindiki, because 3 things, Fred, that this president must consider going into the next election, even as he replaces, if there's a replacement for Rigathi Gachagua. That person must, 1, be able to campaign. He must be a lethal campaigner. 2, must be able to mobilize resources, because campaigns are a very expensive affair. 3, that person must be somebody that can also become president in the future, so that he is able to protect him going forward. So those factors are part of the attributes that he needs to consider the person that he elects the next time. That person must be able to be a future leader, so that as a president, and they probably, if at all there are things that Kenya consider that is done wrong, he can be able to survive politically, because that's also a factor. When you look at those three things, then Kindiki Kithure becomes the least considered for that, because it doesn't bring the numbers, doesn't bring the resources, and I doubt whether he can mount a serious presidential campaign anytime based on where he comes from. So he ceases to be somebody that is has weight.
Yes.
He might want to look on the other areas, because, and I wanted to come into this, because then in the event that he chooses somebody from the mountain, where does this leave the new friends he's trying to create in the Nyanza and the Western region? Because that would have been the perfect replacement to what he's losing. Because then there is no doubt if he insists on getting a candidate from the central region, we might have a President Uhuru situation where you have elected leaders with the president, but the masses are on the other side.
Yes.
Everybody that stood with Uhuru Kenyatta lost his seat in central Kenya. They only managed to get 2 seats, one in Nyandarua, and 2 parliamentary seats in Meru, I think Central Meru there. So 3 MPs on Jubilee out of almost 30.
Yeah.
That was a clean sweep.
Yes.
Because the masses did not agree with what the president has said. So he risks facing such a situation where he might have now the Kimani Ichung'was and Ndindi Nyoro. But where
lose
the people,
the masses.
But lose the masses. And when you lose the masses, and assuming then he's chosen a replacement from the mountain who then suffers the same fate, because technically, yes, he's the deputy president, but he's not able to translate the votes in that region. And yet there's the other regions where they can reconsider their opinions.
Yes.
You know, the Nyanza and the Western region maybe makes him Davide as a deputy president. He might have some weight, because human beings think differently. There are those of us who can stand on principle, but there are other ones who will say, I saw it with the way the cabinet of Paranya. Did you see the celebration?
Yes.
The celebrations were there because people were saying our son is now back in power. So it has weight.
Amazing country.
It is also weight. So that is an open field which can have a much higher returns when if he's, assuming he's able to get, say, Dawadi or somebody from Nyanza, say Gladys Wanga or Badi, and make him Opiyo Wandayi, because he seems to be Raila's favorite now in terms of succession, and he's from Siaya, and makes him the deputy president, then the Nyanza can change their mind considering Raila is exiting. So that has more returns than getting a candidate from Central,
which is already considered gone.
It's an opposition, completely considered gone. I hope you're seeing what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because
now let me ask you, if we go to an election with this kind, because what is going to happen is that the temperatures are going to just keep on going up.
Absolutely.
For the next 3 years. Now, we have an economy that is still struggling.
Very true.
Politically, we are not in a very good position.
Yes.
Now, I'm seeing that the government, KRA, is going to go after people's PIN numbers, till numbers, yes, and pay bills. And I've seen, and mostly so from our brothers from Islia, Somali brothers, businessmen.
Yes.
You go there these days, they're just telling you, don't send it to till, or so it's going to affect Safaricom, because people will stop dealing with them.
Their lead product, which is M-Pesa.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fred, these are the consequences of not having a tactical regime that then considers public participation as far as policy decisions are made. Fred, I tell you this, that there is no country in the world that has taxed its people to success. It's very impossible. Because the challenge in Kenya hasn't been that people do not want to pay taxes. People pay taxes. And also when even you consider the tax of how you're able to increase taxes, you can choose to do it indirectly. Because Fred, I might not pay VAT or pay as you want, but I might not pay as you want or income tax from a business perspective, but I can't escape VAT on sugar, on so and so. It's a softer tax as opposed to what you're doing, because then there are people back then I remember when we used to be in college and sometimes would want to go hang out, then you had joints which used to have tickets, you were charged to get in. Sometimes you'd have even more money than what they're charging. But just the idea that you're telling me to give the 500 shillings at the door makes me to change my mind, because human beings behave like that. So the issue of the till numbers and the pay bill numbers could be an idea of how to be able to net as many people as possible to pay their taxes, but they've not quite considered it in terms of implementation. Fred, that's why this government has struggled with 3 things. It struggled with implementing the CBC program because of lack of enough civic education to educate the people, and also preparation, because that process struggled on 2 things. It struggled with what they struggled with costing and also the human infrastructure they needed to implement it.
Yes.
Because then the concept was good, because everybody agrees, Fred, that I can be a good academic, but you can be a good basketball player.
Yes.
And all of us would wish to succeed in life. So then the idea of CBC was that to allow all of us to succeed. I can succeed in papers and then you can succeed elsewhere. Nobody disagreed with that.
Yes.
That's why the concept of CBC was agreed by everybody.
Yes.
But just the implementation they failed to do, particularly the costing. They were unable to cost what is the cost of the infrastructure that would need to be able to roll out this process. Then they were unable to do the costing. What is the human infrastructure that you need to be able to sustain this process? Because then when you say we are introducing a new JSS system, then it means across 1,450 wards, 1,450 wards,
Yes.
so almost 14,500 schools,
Yes.
which might need 3, maybe 4, maybe 10 teachers. You need then 14,000 teachers, or, I mean, sorry, 14,000 teachers in maybe 10 per school is about 140,000 teachers. That means budgeting for prices. They didn't do that. And so the process now becomes symbolic because of that lack of preparation and civic education. And it's the same challenge that now we've had with the shift process, because you've seen especially the private institutions,
Yes.
and they had a valid concern because they're saying we have not yet transitioned to this process. How can we begin to charge to transfer patients to anybody who's coming for services to that program? And then the program has not been rolled to
Grand ideas, but not well planned
Absolutely, which is what mirrors what you're saying with the pay bill program. Because the whole idea is that how do we net people into the tax bracket? But they're forgetting that how do we make sure that it's done in a manner that the businesses understand how that is supposed to come at play? Because Kenyan's economy, out of the 19 million Kenyans that are considered to be working, only 3 million of them are working what you call a formal employment. So they're the ones who are paying pay as you want. But we have 16 million people, Fred, who are also working, but they're not in the tax base. There are people we have always discussed with you who are in the meat business, and they're making hundreds of thousands every day. By all means, they qualify even for the VAT bracket, because VAT is supposed to, I think it's now about 6 million shillings a year. So any business that is making 500,000 a month is supposed to be enlisted into the line. We have traders at Wakulima Market who are bringing in trucks of goods from sweet potatoes and whatever from elsewhere.
True.
And they're generating millions on a weekly basis, but they are nowhere in the taxes.
They don't pay taxes.
Those informal areas are the areas where they're supposed to look at, but then the tact of how to do that is what they're lacking, because then this other process will still lock them out of the tax system.
Well, it's going to be a week to look out for. Let's see how it goes. What I mostly pray for this country is justice. If Gachagua is guilty, by all means, let him go. If he's not guilty, let justice prevail. Whether I support him or not is not the case here. We have to stand for truth. And that is very, very important in this country, because it's going to determine so many things going forward. It's going to determine so many things. It will set a precedent that now if me as a president, I'm not happy with George as my deputy, I can easily do this and kick the deputy out. And the same thing will happen also for the presidents. If the deputies are very popular and they can be able to amass numbers, they'll kick out their bosses. So I'm hoping the judiciary will be able to do what it needs to do. Do have yourself a lovely day. God bless you. Thank you very much, Ngaira.
Thank you. Okay.